Good morning and welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. I'm Councillor Karimi Govanlu and I'll be chairing the Planning Committee meeting today. On the top table, we have Andrew Willard and Liz Poole from Norfolk Highways. Thank you for attending. And Peter Kerrison, Tracy Lincoln, myself, Eleanor Lamming and Lucy from Democratic Services. We are not expecting a fire drill today, but if the alarm does sound, the fire exits are clearly signed in green. This meeting is being live streamed. Members of the public are welcome to film proceedings as long as they are not disruptive to the conduct of the meeting. If anyone wishes to film or record this meeting, please identify yourselves now. Thank you. Please can you ensure that all your mobile phones and electronic devices are turned to silent. Councillors, please do not use your mobile phone whilst the committee is in session. We will have comfort breaks if needed at various times throughout the meeting. If you must use your mobile, then please leave the room. However, you will appreciate that this could result in you not being able to vote on the matter under discussion at the time you leave the room. The order of business is as set out on the agenda. Members of the public can only speak if prior arrangements have been made in accordance with the Council's scheme of public speaking. The time allocated is a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker or parish council. Only people who have registered to speak will be able to address the committee. The order will be as follows. The planning officer will present the application. Public speakers will then be asked to present their case, followed by questions from members of the committee. And this is to clarify something the speaker has said and not to invite for the speaker to put further points across. The order of public speaking is town, parish council first, followed by objectors and finally supporters. Excuse me. Council members who are not members of the committee will then be invited to speak for the allocated time of a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker. This will be followed by questions from members of the committee. Again, these questions will only be to clarify something the speaker has said and not to invite the speaker to put further points across. The committee will then discuss and determine the application. Finally, there is no provision for members of the public to circulate documents or photographs, etc. at the meeting. Are there any questions before I open the meeting? Declarations of interest. Any members of the committee have any declarations of interest? Joe.
Thank you, Chair. I believe this application is within the watershed catchment of the Broads Internal Drainage Board, and I am a board member. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nigel. Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry, Chair, I believe all members received some lobbying material this morning as well. Yes. From an objector.
Yeah, you've all received your lobbying material, yeah? Yeah. Lucy, do you have any apologies, please?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Orber and Councillor Leggett with Councillor Brennan as his sub.
Can I take you to the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th and the 21st of January? Is everyone happy with those minutes? You got a comment?
Yes, please. I will just say I have noted that on page 17 they talk about the Langley South application. I do understand that a new application has been made for a reduced number of properties to 63 on that. Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to the applications. We have an application for Rackheath. It's 2022-0663, land north of Green Lane, West Rackheath. It's on page 114 of your report, and I invite Peter to present the presentation. Thank you, Peter.
Brilliant, thank you, Chair. So I'll start by running through the description of development, which is long, so bear with me on this one. So application 2022-0663 for land north of Green Lane, West Rackheath. So we've got an outline application for mixed-use residential-led development up to 3,850 dwellings, employment land, local centres, community facilities, classes EG, B2, B8, C2, C3, E, F1, F2 and sui generis, 2 primary schools, 1 secondary school, associated cycle vehicle parking, informal open space, landscaping, sports provision, orchards, allotments, utilities, energy centres, substations, foul water treatment, pumping stations, sustainable urban drainage infrastructure, internal access, pedestrian and cycle infrastructure, EV charging infrastructure, with all matters reserved except for vehicular access, which is being considered in full as part of this application. I will try and wrap through this as efficiently as possible. I've got a substantial number of slides to walk you around the site, so we'll start off. So in terms of the application site itself, we've got taking up a large proportion of the parish of Rackheath. The northern end of the site also goes into Salhouse parish as well, up in this section up here. As you can see, the NDR running around the northeast of Norwich, New Rackheath in here, Salhouse village, Wroxham to the north, the existing industrial estate to the west in terms of the context of the location. In terms of the principle of the development coming forward, this site forms a key element of the Growth Triangle Area Action Plan, allocated as allocation number GT16, highlighted in the brown hatching up in the top here. That particular allocation also includes the green infrastructure links, the mixed-use development, along with a buffer zone up in the north of the site, hatched in green. This application takes up the majority of the allocation, but not all of it. There are two small parcels outside of this that are subject to separate applications, which I will highlight later. So just zooming in on the allocation itself, as you can see, again, putting it into context, you've got the existing industrial estate, you've got Rackheath down here, Salhouse starting off to the side of the image. In terms of the one of the separate parcels, this little parcel down the bottom here is outside of this particular application. It's got another application in currently. And then moving on to the northern part of the allocation. So the majority of this hatched area in brown is within this proposal, apart from this area just here, which is subject to another outline application, which you've already seen coming through committee with its recommendation. So in terms of the original allocation, it was required for a master planning process. So there was a master plan done a number of years ago in 2018, which is images on the screen. This proposal coming forward is broadly aligns with that master plan, with a few changes to it. In terms of this was done without an application, so the detail within this application updates and puts more detail on that. So in terms of the master plan submitted with this particular proposal, as an outline application, apart from the access points, this is an illustrative master plan, but there are certain elements that will be required in certain locations just because of site constraints, phasing requirements, and how the site is delivered. So what I am going to do is walk around the site and go through the various elements of this master plan sort of piece by piece and give you some photos as we go. Just placing that plan into context in terms of keeping track of where you are on the site as I go around. The tree belts running up the centre of the site here follow the path of the old runway that was the Rackheath airfield during World War II. There are still certain elements on the site that are left from the airfield in terms of aircraft stands down in the south, and some concrete left from that original runway. But if you follow the lines of the tree belts in here, and they're sort of retained as part of the development, they're quite good wayfinders in terms of where you are on the site. In terms of close boundary interactions, the majority of the site borders open countryside. Down in the east side, it borders the railway line. There's some residential close to the boundary in the south. There's the boundary with the industrial estate through the middle here. There's a further residential down in this bottom corner. And then there's a parcel with an existing business in the centre, a plant hire business. And then another small parcel that's outside of the application site, but that's currently just a patch of woodland that just forms land outside of the current application. Some other key features in terms of looking at this site, Muck Lane, which is referred to quite extensively in terms of the application assessment, crosses the site from east to west through here. Stonehouse Road crosses east to west up in the north end of the site in this location, and I'll pick up how those are dealt with when I zoom in on the images a little bit closer. Salhouse Station is in this location over towards the eastern boundary. So onto the access points. So the part that is in full in this particular application. So there's 3 key points of vehicular access to be delivered as part of the scheme. So the first one is on Green Lane West, which I'll come into more detail later on in the presentation, but that Green Lane West will be realigned to be priority into the site, and that'll be the phase 1 access point. There's then 2 points of access up onto the Roxham Road, so a priority junction in this location and then a new roundabout up in the far north of the site in this location. In terms of the heights and parameters in relation to how the design of the site's coming forward, obviously as an outline we don't have details of exact designs or materials at this point, but the application is supported by a design code document which lays out how that will be approached. In terms of alignment with neighbourhood plans, which do emphasise trying to keep densities lower around the edge in terms of countryside buffers and having any higher density in the middle, this building height parameter outlines how that's going to be achieved with higher densities focused around spine roads and the centre of the site. And then we've also got an indicative phasing plan submitted in support of the application, but again as an indicative plan, this outlines how it's intended to come forward. There are certain points on here that are not necessarily fixed and may alter from the plans on here, but it's a good starting point in terms of seeing how the principle of the development of the site is being approached. So again, just before I go on to the zoomed in images, just to align all those three points, you've got the submitted master plan, the allocation, and then the site phasing in terms of how it's being brought forward. So to start down in the far south of the site, so around where the phase 1 location is proposed to be, with the access coming off of Green Lane West. The realigned Green Lane West is coming in on the south here. There's a small element of new employment adjacent to the existing industrial estate in this location. This is also the location of the proposed primary substation that's required very early on in terms of the utilities provision in the site. The first of the 2 primary school sites is proposed in this phase as well in terms of the land option, and there is a small local centre proposed in here, which is subject to a potential community use land option, but a fallback position of being a commercial local centre with local services in it. The parcel down in the south here that's outside of the red line, I will note that a new full application for that site was submitted last week and is in its very early stages, so that's Norfolk Homes have proposed 143 dwellings in there. In terms of identifying other elements of this plan as we go forward, the green areas with the stars on here are drainage basins and suds features, so you'll see those sort of as we go through. There's also indicative areas of open space shown with play areas and other things, and then just down in the south in terms of some of the key highway features as well. These 2 yellow arrows identify pedestrian and cycle links through to the existing part of Rackheath. That woodland is Broadland District Council owned land, so those links can be secured through the Section 106 in terms of their delivery, and they're a key element of connecting the new development with the existing residential site. The existing Rackheath primary school is just off the southern end of this plan, and obviously we've got the new potential primary school site within this element of the site as well. And again, just putting that overlaying on the aerial image, so you can see that in context of where of what it looks like now. You'll see it's broadly open fields. The master plan follows the landscape features in terms of the open field areas, retaining those tree belts through the site. And then just an indication of how that's likely to come forward in terms of phase 1, and then moving through to the east towards phase 2. In terms of that then, so this is the location on Green Lane West where that access is proposed to come in. So the development site is all off to the side in here, so the new road will curve into the site in this particular location. And then I'm stood on the other side of that hedge looking into the site, So that's the new housing with the industrial estate in the background. So the spine road will come north through this particular area. And then this is looking from the industrial estate back over towards an existing farm, and then that Norfolk Home site's in the distance with Green Lane West off to the side over here. One theme you will pick up is this site is very flat for the vast majority with wide fields, so it does look broadly similar for most of the photos. This is just looking down the site boundary, so the woodland here is where the foot and cycle link through to the existing part of Rackheath would go. The Norfolk Home site is just off to the side through the hedge here. And that site, so the secondary spine road would have a requirement to come to the boundary there to be able to enable a link in with that neighbouring development. And then this is looking across a little bit further north, so this is the end of one of the tree belts for the runway, existing residential in Rackheath, and then that woodland again that I showed with the foot and cycleway connections. So that was where we were. So just moving around the site, moving over to where towards the east in terms of phase 2. So this is where we start interacting with Muck Lane coming across the top. We've got the large formal sports provision area with the pavilion running up the side of the railway in here. The runway running down the middle here. There's an existing public right-of-way that crosses the site through this location. That's proposed to be retained but realigned slightly as part of the application. And then you've got the existing part of Salhouse with the railway station up in the top. So one of the key elements of this particular part of the site is the closure of Muck Lane at this point. So that will stop traffic exiting the application site through Station Road. There will still be foot and cycle links through there for sustainable transport. And then there'll be a new car park and bus hub for this railway station. So for existing traffic coming from the Salhouse direction, the existing car park will remain in use from that direction, and then a new car park for anybody coming from the west side from the new development in terms of parking, and the buses will be able to go round there as well in terms of new bus routes. Again, putting that onto the Google Earth image just so you can see in context where we are, so that shows slightly better Muck Lane coming through the site. The remainder of Muck Lane is proposed to be a combination of realignment and pedestrianisation to form part of the green infrastructure through the site. The other element of this site, I'll flick back because I didn't quite pick it up, is this location is where the gas pipeline, high pressure gas pipeline easement runs. So at the moment that easement is quite wide, and part of the proposal is to bury and strengthen that pipeline to narrow that easement down. So the Health and Safety Executive won't allow formal sports over the top of the easement, so it needs to be narrowed down to be able to fit the quantum of sports provision in that's required. So that's through this location here. And then just showing that interaction, there will probably need a slight change to this phasing plan in terms of how it interacts with the formal sports, but ultimately this area is going from phase 2 towards phase 3, so again, building from south to north potentially. So looking on the ground, this is Muck Lane around about the point that is proposed for closure. With there, so that the plant hire business I referenced is in front here, and that new station car park will be in this field off to the side. Looking through, this is the public right-of-way that then runs through the site. These barns are part of the application site proposed for demolition and inclusion in the application. And this is looking at that public right-of-way, so this is then where it takes off across the field, and that tree belt in the distance there is the line of the runway. So sort of identifying the scale of the site, we're just looking across that one parcel here. This is the area for the formal sports, in with existing development down the side, and the tree belt here that then goes down towards phase 1 and 2. So that's beyond that tree belt, and then I'm standing over by the runway looking back towards Salhouse and Muck Lane, and the station is over in the distance over here. Again, just a wider view of the residential part of that field. So this is then still with the line of the runway behind me, then looking north, so the application site goes beyond those trees in the distance, just giving a sense of scale of where we are in the middle of the site. And then Plant Hire Business and Muck Lane is in the sort of middle ground in here. So again, shifting over back towards the industrial estate. So key elements of this particular area, so you've got the existing industrial estate which will require some noise bunding and mitigation down the side in terms of securing amenity for new residents. The former control tower is sat right in this location on the edge of the industrial estate, sort of at the termination point of that public right of way as it exits the site. And then this is where we start getting some of the proposed employment area that's proposed as part of this application. And then you've got the neighbouring development submitted next door here with the required connection point through into to join the two sites for employment and pedestrian sustainability and vehicular access into there. Again, the line of Muck Lane comes through here. As you can see, it's mainly pedestrianised in this route, and the Spine Road crosses it on its way up to the north. There, and then coming in for some context with the aerial image. Again, the neighbouring application sits in here, the existing industrial estate, the line of Muck Lane running across. There's quite a complex arrangement in terms of potential phasing in this particular location, because of the need for the second access up onto Wroxham Road. Phase 2 actually delivers the Spine Road up into this location, and that will exit out. I'll show it in a later slide in terms of where that exits, so that delivers the potential connection and employment land within that phase 2 area as well. Coming down again onto the site, so I'm stood on the former runway here, looking towards the south, down towards the phase 1 area, and this is the right of way again going across another flat field over towards the control tower, which is in the distance, and the industrial estate. And then just looking north up the runway again, so this line of trees is roughly where Muck Lane is, and then the trees in the distance are the far northern part of the application. And then looking west over, so this is the Halsbury developments in the distance over here. So that tree line is the separation between their residential and employment area. So the employment in this application will sit just in front of that. And again, this line is approximately where the divide between the neighbouring application and this application is. So this little area in the foreground will be employment, and then the neighbouring application's employment, which is outside of this application, will be just off to the side here, and then Muck Lane running along that area. Right, so moving north again, this brings us up to where that Spine Road comes out into the priority junction on Wroxham Road. As you can see, the employment area extends up into this particular location as well. Shows a little bit more clearly that neighbouring outline application over to the south here. One of the requirements when this Spine Road crosses Muck Lane, the access off of Wroxham Road onto Muck Lane must be closed, and that's the point when that becomes pedestrianised, with it being replaced by this priority junction. This is also the potential location of the wastewater treatment works, if it were to come forward as part of this application, is in the employment area here. Also within this area, this is where the sort of central core of services is approximately proposed to be. So secondary school site, the leisure centre, 3G pitch, primary school, and the second local centre is all proposed to be in a cluster together to give a focal point for the new development. And then we've just got up to where Stonehouse Road is up in the north here, and Stonehouse Road will have a similar arrangement to Muck Lane, where that will be closed in terms of its access points at both ends, and used primarily as a pedestrian and cycle route through the site. And again, coming down onto the aerial image for a bit of context, you've got Muck Lane, the fields in which the employment sits there, potential local centre here, and then Stonehouse Road running across the top, and then you've got Wroxham Road running up the side. And again, a slightly complex interaction of different phases of potential in this location. So phase 2 in terms of the triggers with that access off of Muck Lane. While this shows phase 4 for for the school land, there is the potential to service that earlier because of the spine road coming up here. So part of the potential trigger points for offering the land to the county council, local education authority, at that point could come through the phase 2 bit and that will be decided through discussions with county. So looking down onto the site. This is looking south from Muck Lane, so this is towards the secondary school. That's supposed to be north from Muck Lane. All the fields look the same. So that's into the secondary school site north from Muck Lane to where the leisure centre and another local centre would be. Swinging around that field, again, quite a wide open area, but with another tree belt sitting to the north. Stonehouse Road is beyond that towards the north. And then the employment side would sit down this edge. And then looking south across Muck Lane, or no, still north across Muck Lane. So this is the next parcel along looking north. So this is where the wastewater treatment works potentially would go and further employment, and then the Roxham Road is on the far side, over in that side of the road. So coming over onto Roxham Road. So this is stood at the Stonehouse Road junction looking south, so that new priority junction would come out sort of in there, roughly where that silver car is, down the road there. And the junction I'm stood on here would be closed to vehicular traffic. So shifting back across to the east of the site, we're getting there. So where we were previously with the primary school, leisure centre, secondary local centre sort of over that side, you've got the existing business that's outside the application in this particular location where the development wraps around it, and the station over in this location. So this strip of open space is likely to be broadly fixed because, again, that's the easement of the gas pipeline, so that limits what can be done on that land. And you've got the railway line running down the side. Again, just to show how that appears in its current form, and then slightly simpler phasing in this particular location. What you will notice, and I didn't mention it earlier, is within the phasing, some of these subs features do have to be delivered earlier than the elements around them. Part of the reason for that is the limited infiltration on the site, which means some of the basins have to be built in chains, so they'll flow from one to the next before it then gets to a point where it infiltrates. So that drainage scheme is built around the basins will be linked to when the infiltration is needed as part of the development build out. And a few photos of this location. So this is the plant hire business in the centre of the site, and the station is over on the side there. This is looking up just to the west of the plant hire business. Again, the application site goes all the way to the beyond the woodland in the distance there, and then looking back west towards where the local centre schools would be. The final part of the site to run through. So this is the northern part. So when I showed the allocation plan a little bit earlier, that northern buffer zone, which was hatched in green, covers most of this area, with the requirement for the delivery of the 30-hectare public park, which is shown in this location. Part of the purpose for that is to provide on-site sort of recreation walking to help buffer impacts on the Broads, because Wroxham Broad is not very far off the top of this plan. So that's got a couple of uses in terms of general open space delivery plus an element of that protection or mitigation for the protected sites. This location also delivers the roundabout onto Wroxham Road, and you might have seen referred to in the committee reports at the northern end of the site is this ancient woodland up at the top, so there'll be buffering of that woodland in terms of the way the landscape is designed up in the north there as well. And then they've got Stonehouse Road running through it, which will be closed at this location, but will maintain access for some of the farm uses down the end here. And then one thing when I go through the photos, there is a very significant oak tree in the middle of the public park up here, so that's quite a good waypoint because this is again a very wide field without many reference points. So this is looking along Wroxham Road, around about where the roundabout location is proposed to be, and then looking into the site. So the Wroxham Road is behind the hedge behind me here. So the roundabout is proposed to be offline of the current line in this location of the site. And then that tree I highlighted is here. You have a little bit of topography in this area, so it's one of the only parts of the site which isn't completely flat. So the roundabout would be off to the side, and then the public park would broadly stretch over the ridge of this hill over into the distance there. That ancient woodland I highlighted is just in the corner there, so that's the northernmost part of the application site. And then this is Stonehouse Road, where the access will be closed. And part of the reason, I think this image is a fairly good way of highlighting it, part of the reason for turning Stonehouse Road and Muck Lane into the pedestrian cycleways is that enables the more retention of some of these existing hedgerow and tree features along. Because if we were to use these roads as part of the development, we'd have to widen them, and a lot of that would end up having to be removed. So that helps protect some of the existing vegetation and habitat on the site. So just coming along Stonehouse Road, looking north, that tree again is just there. Wroxham Road in the distance, the ancient woodland over to the side there. And then just looking east towards the site boundary. And then there is another right of way that runs from Stonehouse Road diagonally over towards the railway station, over towards the railway line, and then crosses the railway line. This is the far end of Stonehouse Road, roughly where it will be closed off. And then this is just looking down into the site, so there's a neighbouring farm, so this is the northeasternmost part of the site. This is part of the public park this field is proposed. And then that public right-of-way I showed the other end of earlier, this field in front is where the public park will be, and then this crosses outside of the application site over into the countryside on the other side. So that's where we were in terms of that particular location. I will quickly run through, I think, because it's one of the most key elements of the site, where the highway improvements are outside of the three primary access points. So I've highlighted the ones we've already covered on here, but then we've also got works being done to Green Lane West Wroxham Road Junction, the NDR Wroxham Road Junction, and the Solon Hill roundabout down in the bottom here. There's also pedestrian cycle paths along Green Lane West proposed down here, and works to the public right-of-way running through the site. So just giving a little bit more detail on what sort of thing is proposed at each one of the junctions. So this is the Green Lane West access point, as you can see, just highlighting the realignment and priority junction in there. This is the access point of the new priority junction up onto the Wroxham Road, kind of also showing a bit of the Muck Lane closure with linking into footpaths through the site in that particular location. This is where the new roundabout is proposed up in the north of the site. And again, that oak tree I highlighted is sat just there, so that shows how far into the site that comes. Over in terms of the existing railway station, so this shows the proposed interaction between the existing car park, which is shown in grey here, and the proposed new one and bus loop, with the turning head here showing where it's proposed to be closed. And then down onto the existing mini roundabout by the Solon Hill pub is proposed to be signalised rather than a mini roundabout, and that is primarily to aid pedestrian and cycle safety in terms of the routes past this particular location. The new medical centre is open, and it is further down Green Lane East, so that enables the sustainable links down to that new medical centre. Coming up to the Green Lane West Wroxham Road Junction, showing that signalisation of that. And then the Wroxham Road NDR Junction, which is proposed for some slight widening and road marking realignment to aid traffic flow across the junction. So in terms of works that are slightly further afield, included in the highway mitigation, working from north to south, potential trod path extension up at Salhouse Road, Bell Lane. That's potentially for pedestrian access up to Wroxham. There's one small section of road that doesn't have any pedestrian facility on it. There is commuter some proposed for a new, or the completion of the foot and cycleway along Salhouse Road. It's being built, or it's been built up to about that point, outside the other developments being built along there, but again there's this last section that needs to be joined to enable foot and cycle connection between the application site and Norwich. There's other potential improvements down at Atlantic Avenue and Blueball Lane, subject to further review later on in the application. There's a small element of footpath proposed around the Broadland Plumstead Road connection, just to make that crossing safer. That then enables a clear foot and cycle route from the application site down towards Broadland Business Park. So I've highlighted those three routes. So these are the off-site sustainable transport routes that are sort of facilitated by those individual works joining together existing facilities. So you've got orange going into the city, you've got blue coming down to Broadland Business Park, and the yellow going up towards Wroxham there. So to pick up some of the things in a little bit more detail that I might not have picked up, I've covered the land for the schools as we've gone through, in terms of the phase 1 local centre, land for the 3G pitch and leisure centre, which I've highlighted as we've gone through. So this is a good point to pick up the affordable housing element and the viability. So you will have seen that the site is not able to deliver the full 33% policy requirement for affordable housing due to viability challenges on the site. I think it's important to understand on this particular one, particularly because of the last couple of big applications that have come through committee where the viability elements have been fairly obvious in terms of site constraints. Whilst it is a flat site, the infrastructure requirements are quite significant and quite early in terms of developing the site out. So those are things like the primary substation requirement, the requirement to either build a wastewater treatment plant or connect a new sewer through to Whitlingham. Highway works in terms of access and any early off-site elements. There's nutrient mitigation, which will be significant for this volume of housing, and the gas pipeline element that comes in fairly early. So there's a combination of the scale of those infrastructure requirements, along with how early they're required in the site, which then has a knock-on effect onto financing costs in terms of the site not being able to break even as early as it would otherwise do because of those costs at the point that they are. So this has been rigorously reviewed and tested with CP viability that have been instructed on behalf of the council to independently review the applicant's position in it, which has come to the figure of 12%. I think the other important thing to note at this particular point is that whilst there's 12% affordable housing, there is still, as I've set out in here, significant social infrastructure delivered as part of the development in terms of land for schools, leisure centre, sports pavilion. You've got the sports pitches and elements like that. So whilst the affordable housing is lower, the scheme overall still delivers a very, very good package in terms of the new development. The proposal is also, because of the length of time a development this size will take to build out, we propose to put into the Section 106 a review of the viability position and a clawback mechanism. So if the economic conditions improve and the site is able to deliver more later on, that can be secured through that particular mechanism within the Section 106. The detail on that is part of the recommendation for delegated authority, subject to the Section 106. So that will be the next stage in terms of drawing that together and putting the wording together. And again, most other elements of this I've covered off as we've gone through the site. You might have seen the Natural England comment, which remains as an objection at the moment, but that's because of two reasons. We haven't finalised the nutrient neutrality element yet, and they need to see that before they remove their objection. And whilst we do that, when we do the habitat regulations assessment for that, we'll cover off the secondary point of the recreation avoidance mitigation. The RAMS payment, the green infrastructure is delivered on site, but then the RAMS element will just be a payment secured through the Section 106 as per the normal process. So once we get those two habitat regulation assessment documents over to Natural England, that will be what they need essentially to remove their holding objection. And then I've just put this as a catch-all at the end in terms of the sections we covered off in the committee report in terms of the access, in terms of the assessment of all the different elements of the scheme. I think I've run through most of these as we've been going around the site in terms of the delivery of certain elements as I've progressed around. So if I come down to the final slide here, I will turn this to the end so I can read you the recommendation because it's fairly long. So I think in terms of the principle, one key element, we do consider it to broadly accord with the allocation in terms of the criteria that's been set out within that. There are certain elements that the allocation is quite specific on that aren't included in there, but we do consider those fully justified in terms of the affordable housing. There's a slight variation in the employment delivery, which we consider to be acceptable. And there are two elements in terms of very specific requirements, which was a police beat base and a recycling centre that are no longer required, and the relevant consultees in respect to those have confirmed that. So it is considered to accord with the allocation. In terms of the rest of the application assessment, it is an environmental impact assessment application. As you have seen in the committee report, we've checked off the key points of that through each of those sections that I showed in the previous slide, and it is considered to be acceptable in that regard. And I guess a final note in terms of, whilst this is an allocated site, we are assessing it in the context that we haven't got a 5-year land supply at the moment, and this delivers a significant contribution to that over a long period of time as it's built out. So that does add is significant weight in favour of the application in this particular instance. So. As I've highlighted all the way through, there are a number of elements that we do require delegated authority to continue negotiating in terms of the Section 106 and other elements. So the recommendation is to authorise the Assistant Director of Planning to approve, subject to the resolution of the habitat regulation matters I've just mentioned with Natural England relating to nutrient neutrality and GIRAMs. There is one highway element to resolve in relation to how the employment in Phase 1 connects to Mackintosh Road, so resolution to that's included. The imposition of conditions necessary to make the development acceptable. You'll have seen a very long list at the end of my committee report. As we write out those conditions, some tweaks may be required in terms of the full detail. Inevitably, some might end up being neater as two conditions, some might get merged into one, but the list of requirements in there will be the same. And then any further conditions, so if when we consult Natural England or we resolve nutrient neutrality, there may be some additional conditions that are required to go on the end there. And then the completion of the Section 106 agreement to cover affordable housing, viability review and clawback mechanism, public open space, formal sports provision including pavilions, school land options, local centre land options, highway connections, commuted sums for travel plan off-site highway works, the 3G pitch and leisure centre, self-build housing, gyrams mitigation and skylark mitigation that comes out of the ecology assessment. I hope that's given a sufficient overview of the scheme, but I open it for questions.
Thank you, Peter, for that very comprehensive report. Do the committee have any questions? Joe, first.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Peter, for your very detailed presentation. This is one of the biggest sites in Broadland. It is extremely complex in terms of infrastructure, and thank you for your detail in your presentation. I'm very interested in the trigger points for some of these infrastructure delivery that we're going to see come forward, particularly the substation, the off-site highways works, particularly the connection to and the improvements to the upgrading the junction on the NDR, also wastewater treatment and public water supply. And I know that there has been concern about the gas main, and some of this has been brought up in the papers by the surrounding parishes. So I would suggest that we bring some of those matters back to planning committee to be determined, rather than just all be delegated to the planning officers as it's so detailed, Chair. Thank you.
I'm quite happy to do that, Joe. Everybody else happy? Thank you, Stuart. Everybody else happy with that? Yeah. Thank you. Is there any other comments you want clarified? Adrian?
Yeah, Peter, sort of clarifies. Just looking at the cycle routes, and you drew an orange cycle route. Can you explain how that's crossing the NDR? Because it's going straight across the highway rather than the roundabout. Seems a bit of an odd.
Yes, so the plan is probably best. So where it crosses here, there is a bridge at Newman Road. So I don't think I've got a close-up plan of it, but there is. Yeah, in this southern location, so the foot and cycle route would come down Green Lane West. This is the junction with Newman Road here, and then there is a bridge across the NDR in this location, an existing one, and then the NDR has foot and cycle ways running along each side of it, so that would connect in with the existing foot and cycle way that's on the Norwich side of the NDR.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Peter. That was very, very thorough. Tell me, this is a site of nearly 4,000 homes, so that'll be around approximately 10,000 souls who'll be living there. Is there a presumption that there's going to be retail facility for, say, a supermarket on site to prevent people travelling either to Wroxham or on the already congested roads going into Sproston to the Lidl and Tesco's? Thank you.
Yeah, so the two local centres, as proposed inside the site, include retail uses within the outline permission for them. So, and the second local centre in particular is quite large. It's around a hectare in size. So there's opportunity for it on there. So that's the main location that those services would be clustered. Which should address that particular issue.
Go Eleanor first and then Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I note that there are some smaller residential sites surrounding this main site. So we've actually just had one come through, I think, in the last week for 143 dwellings, and there's another one that was mentioned for 300 dwellings near the employment site. I just wondered if you could outline how the connections, there will be connections between those smaller sites and this large one. I just wondered if you could outline how the connections will be built out. In other words, could all of those sites be individually developed should another one not come forward, or are they all linked? And how is the process going to be sorted so that the links are arranged, as it were, appropriately.
Yes, so the overall GT16 parcel, in terms of its allocation, the basis of that allocation was for it to work as one, as a complete parcel of development. Obviously, we've got it coming forward under 3 separate applications. So in terms of connection points, we've got one down in the south here and one up further north up here. The requirement would be put on both sides to deliver that those connections unencumbered to the boundary, and then that would enable the development on the opposite side to connect in with it when they get to that point as well. So each one will have their individual triggers for when that's appropriate, within proportionate to their particular development. But ultimately, the intention of the full GT16 parcel is for it to work together, and those connection points and triggers for that will enable that when the development is complete, that they would all be then joined.
Thank you. It was really to reinforce what Joe had already said in essence, because I think we really need more detail on the trigger points for the infrastructure specifically. There's a lot of infrastructure proposed here. Well, in some respects, I mean, I picked up on the NDR junction. I mean, that's already backed up. That junction is already backed up in the current environment, let alone with nearly 4,000 additional houses. So I do think we need to have more clarity in these trigger points. And when the build out of the infrastructure is going to happen, for example, you mentioned the such ponds. We talked about the major issue which we mentioned was the water treatment plant, how the management of foul water is going to be dealt with, and at what stage will there be a requirement. And again, I think Joe has made this very clear, but I'm just trying to reinforce this, that there is a requirement for these applications to come back to this committee so that we can be satisfied that we are achieving the infrastructure at early phases as possible. Because if it's backloaded into the latter phases, the reality of it is the problems start as you start to achieve the mass build out. So we really need as much of this infrastructure front loaded as possible in the interest of maximum achievement for first and foremost the existing local communities, and secondly to make the site work. Because, and I would highly like this now, and again, and I would respect what officers have done as to negotiate this 12% affordable housing. But the reality of it is, based on a phasing programme, that affordable housing could potentially be lost because of the expense of local infrastructure. I mean, for example, if we have to have the build out of the water treatment plant, obviously that's been costed at 24, 25 figures. But by the time that's built out, unless it's built out up front, the reality of it is that affordable housing could be lost in renegotiations of the central of the 106 during the process. And I think we have to be acutely aware of this, and that's why it's important that every part of this development comes back to this committee so that we can examine and be ensured we're getting the best possible outcome for the local area.
I think we've agreed that these trigger points can come back to committee, Stuart, so that's fine. I'm going to ask Tracy to comment on that.
Yeah, firstly, just in terms in relation to the request around bringing triggers back to committee before it's determined. I understand what you're saying. I hear that it is a complex scheme in terms of infrastructure delivery. If members want the reassurance in terms of agreeing those triggers before we grant, then we are happy to do that. Obviously, in terms of those negotiations around where those trigger points land are driven both by when it's necessary in planning terms to deliver those pieces of infrastructure. But we also do have to look at the deliverability of those in relation to how the scheme comes forward. So there is always a balance with that. And obviously there's a significant number of different moving parts and pieces of infrastructure. So we will certainly have those conversations around that and then bring that back to committee. In terms of the point around the viability, those big ticket items in terms of those infrastructure pieces, particularly around the wastewater treatment works, have been costed within that viability appraisal. So you can be confident that that has been assessed, and that's where you've got to in terms of that 12% and the obligations that we are securing. You also do have, I guess, the safety currently, unless the government changes that. In the first 5 years of granting planning permission in Section 106, the council is not obliged to enter into negotiations to amend that Section 106. If those obligations still serve a useful purpose, it is not obliged to have to formally consider those. Now, we often will consider those, because if that means the scheme's wholly unviable and undeliverable, then we will look at those aspects. But we do have some strength in that, in terms of, you know, you have got a developer sat in front of you who has rigorously tested the viability, who is advising you that that 12% can be achieved. There is an element of risk to the developer, and that is built into their profit levels and that viability assessment. So I think, and equally, I hear what you're saying, Councillor Clancy, any reassessment in terms of viability would need to come back to committee, because that would be a significant departure from what we've secured. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I rarely use the NDR, but I gather from the parishes and local residents and people who do that Wroxham Road roundabout is regularly backed up and is extremely busy at certain times of the day. And I just wondered if we could ask the highway officers from Norfolk County Council how the traffic modelling is done, just an overview, and can we have reassurance that if there are issues currently, that the new proposals will address some of the issues, and essentially, will the traffic keep flowing with the extra vehicles we're going to see on the road as a result of this development, should we approve it?
Who would like to answer that?
So the revised modelling, which was done in the TA addendum, showed what we obviously all understand to be the case, that there's queuing on Wroxham Road currently. That modelling, with the way it's currently set out, identified what we believe to be what's causing that issue, which is largely down to the poor use of the approaching lanes to the Wroxham Road junction. The scheme, which has been agreed with the applicant, whilst it might look relatively minor, we believe will address that issue, and it will lengthen the number of lanes, which will enable the traffic which wants to turn left onto the NDR, which is currently blocked by people going straight over and turning right. It will allow them to do that, and then will free up the capacity to, as you say, keep things moving. And that's been remodelled, and we're comfortable that will work with the scale of development which is now proposed.
I'm just trying to get my head around and understand it. So what's the changes on the Wroxham, on the Browston side, the south side of the junction? They widen that junction, or what's the change? You said the changes, what they, I'm trying to, that's difficult to see in this plan, what, yeah.
As you approach the roundabout from Wroxham Road, from both directions, from the Wroxham direction and the Norwich direction, the road splits from a single lane on Wroxham Road into multiple turning lanes. The length of those different lanes is quite short. So the proposal is to extend the length over which those the various lanes, the turning left, going straight over and turning right, extend the length of those lanes to give people the ability to turn into those lanes at an earlier than they currently can do, such that traffic that wanting to make one manoeuvre isn't blocking traffic that's trying to get into one of those other lanes. when we looked at it in detail, specifically in the evening coming out, there's lots of queues heading back into Norwich, but the left-hand lane for vehicles wanting to head round to the north onto the NDR couldn't get into their turning lane because the traffic is blocked back from the middle and right turning lane, and so this will help to alleviate that and enable people to get into the lanes they need to be, and then help with the free flowing of the junction.
Does that mean, so I'm thinking, as there isn't a spray centre, you head north on that roundabout, does that mean that that'll be widened so you can get to your left and right hand lane earlier?
It'll be widened earlier than it currently is in essence.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. How far back is it going to be widened?
I haven't got that figure to date. I haven't got that figure with me at the moment. I mean, it should be sufficient based on the modelling we've done, such that it enables the junction to be used more efficiently. And that's the problem at the moment. The junction can't be used efficiently as it's currently laid out.
Yeah, there was like 20-minute tailbacks today on both sides of the.
Yes.
What's the timeline for that to get that done?
The current proposal is to bring forward those improvements in line with the phasing when Wroxham Road starts to become used more frequently once the junctions onto Wroxham Road from the development are constructed. We envisage the early phases with the layout of the junction onto Green Lane West will focus most of the traffic down to the Salhouse Road end of Green Lane West and then onto the NDR there, rather than bringing forward all the infrastructure up front. We felt it was reasonable to push that back to, I can't remember whether it's phase 2 or phase 3 off the top of my head, but when the development comes forward, which brings forward the first priority junction onto Wroxham Road, prior to that they should be implementing the works to the Wroxham Road NDR junction. That's when the impact
I do use
starts
that road
to become
quite a bit. I'm sure Adrian uses that road quite a bit, and that is chock-a-block.
Yeah, we
and I would
appreciate that.
recommend that you do it a bit earlier than what you said, phase 1 and 2.
I'm not satisfied with that answer. It was completely nebulous. We need to know exactly when the trigger point is to upgrade the junction of the MDR. Local people are already suffering from a dangerous highway situation, and this application and the build out of this scheme will exacerbate that hugely. So we need to know the exact trigger point now when the upgrade to the NDR Wroxham Road junction will happen, please, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, so I've got the current proposed trigger is around the 850th occupation, and that's based on when it's necessary for this particular scheme. It's not, we can't do it based on the fact that there's existing problems. It's got to be when this scheme triggers the need for it.
Frankly, that's too ambiguous. 850 is a lot. And then Peter's answer was very ambiguous because it wasn't actually a trigger point based on that 850. For this size development, under the terms of the original Greater Norwich Development Partnership, it's infrastructure, jobs and housing. There is a big risk here on all these large developments that what we're getting is what is needed, housing. I'm not denying housing is needed. Housing is definitely needed. But what we're not guaranteeing at an early stage of these developments is the infrastructure. It's obvious that that particular junction is already, I don't know whether it's working at capacity, but what I do know, there's considerable tailbacks. I used it myself Monday, and in reality, 800 plus houses could be, possibly, might be, is not acceptable. We need another example, in the substation. Is there enough energy? Is there going to be enough energy? At what stage is that substation going to be built, connected and available? I think these things, we mustn't fall into the trap of actually accepting these things in an ambiguous format, in a woolly and a way which doesn't clearly define what we are trying to achieve and when we're trying to achieve it, because there is a huge risk we are going to get massive multi-thousand developments without the commensurate infrastructure. I mean, this, if you look at this highway improvements, many of those lanes, junctions already on the NDR are set out like this, and they don't work particularly well at the moment. So we need to address this issue in a way which achieves this at a much, much earlier stage. But not just that, we need more clarity, and there needs to be this emphasis on much more upfront development of infrastructure, because there's a risk, frankly, Chairman, that won't happen. And I think if we approve applications of this scale without the guarantee, cast iron, and again, the planning officer's already alluded to it, this can be renegotiated based on the Section 106 in 5 years. Well, this is, 4,000 houses. I don't know how long it'll take to develop, first 5 years, but what it won't be is certainly 4,000 houses. So this will be up for renegotiation at a very early stage in this whole process. We have to get this right, Jim, and it's in the interest of the residents moving into this development and the interests of all the surrounding parishes in the area. If we don't get it right at this stage, the reality of it is we will never get it right, and all we're doing is creating and building up problems in every conceivable reason. The employment land, that isn't enough. We need high-skilled, more jobs. You know, the supermarket is fine, and, you know, lots of good people work in supermarkets. That's great. But what we're not putting enough emphasis, there's not enough emphasis in the report and the economic aspects of the report. Where are the new high-skilled jobs? Rackheath Industrial Estate, frankly, is not going to take X amount more new jobs. There is a piece of employment land, which a lot of that is going to be taken up by, should it ever be built, the wastewater treatment plant. So there is issues we must address, Chairman.
Got Peter first, then Joe.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to associate Stuart's comments also with the Salhouse Road junction and the feeder roads to that north and south. That road is totally unsatisfactory for the 21st century, and if we really need, it'll only divert traffic away from Sproston to that road, and anyone who travels there in the morning or in the evening will know it's a death trap, particularly in the winter. I'm pleased to see there's going to be some sort of cycle provision along there, but at the moment it is a terribly dangerous piece of road, and it has been for many years.
Thank you, Chair. I still have concerns about the highways. We've already heard that there is from the officer that there is a live application from Norfolk Homes for 143 new homes south of this site, and I think we need to be cognizant. I know we're determining this application, but Planning Committee needs to be cognizant of the trigger points for the cumulative development in the area in terms of these major highway upgrades that are urgently required. Thank you, Chair.
I just want to clarify a couple of points. So certainly just want to reassure you in terms of the work that has been undertaken around the highway works, the off-site infrastructure works. That has been robustly tested by the Highway Authority. You'll appreciate, you know, as a matter of determining applications across a number of applications on committee, we can't address existing problems. So we have to look at what is the appropriate highway trigger point that's necessary to make this development acceptable. Now, the transport assessment that was submitted with the application absolutely looks at all of those cumulative impacts and identifies what junctions, what improvements are necessary. We then have to align that with, and again, this is going to be complex because the large amount of development coming forward, that's why those triggers are important in terms of what volume of housing for this development will trigger those necessary highway works. And that might be a number, and that might be spatially derived because it's a particular part of the development. So obviously you have already requested that those triggers come back to committee. What I kind of will say is, one, I've noted your concerns around the Roxton Road NDR junction, and we'll certainly go away and have some further conversations with the developer on that. Having said that, they are driven by when it's necessary in highway terms. So we can have a look at that entire package and see what the developers are comfortable with around some of that. But I think, you know, that request to bring those triggers back to committee, absolutely happy to do that. I'll just say we'll just reinforce that will be driven by what's necessary and reasonable in highway terms and in planning terms, because that is what is defendable when we grant a planning permission for that. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, just as a last point on this junction, I suppose the way I look at this is that I think, as Peter showed his original plan with the Greater Norwich growth and the idea with the outline of this new NDR we're putting in over the north of Norwich, and I think the biggest shame is we're having to now, as we develop, we knew we were building. We've got this development, Beeston Park, immediately the other side of this roundabout, big massive developments. We knew years ago, as local authorities, we were going to build an NDR and all this new housing, and it's just such a shame that even now that roundabout isn't really working for local residents. There's lots of tailbacks, lots of holds up, lots of road traffic accidents, and it's a shame that local authorities weren't more joined up, and we weren't cutting budgets on the NDR, because the NDR should be fit for purpose for our growing communities, should accommodate developments like this and Beeston Park without us having to continually go back and change things and so on. It's a shame there's not enough forward thinking, because otherwise issues like this could have been resolved much earlier, but that's the only fancy on this roundabout.
If I can just, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I can't talk to kind of, I guess, how the design of the NDR, certainly that was designed to accommodate the growth coming forward in this area. So that was its principal purpose in terms of relieving that. We have to come back to this application and what's necessary for this planning permission. So I guess if there are challenges in terms of how it's been constructed and capacity, that's obviously one matter. We need to look at how does this development impact that junction, and I think as we kind of were set out, there is improvements that are necessary, and then we just need to look at when does that come a point of critical mass and an issue around the new occupants of this development, and when does that mean that this work needs to happen. So I think we absolutely hear what you're saying. I think we can't address
further
challenges.
We have to look at this application, this development, and it's good that the changes are being proposed to try to ease some of the issues. It's just a lack of foresight that, you know, you could have seen this coming from many years ago.
Can I just say, I do appreciate highways coming here, and I do apologise if you, but at least you've got an idea of what councillors think about this area here.
Thank you, Chair. Just staying on the aspect of transport, though, I'm actually quite pleased to see in these plans the level of sustainable transport links being planned. Lots of thought has gone into the provision of cycleways, pedestrian footways, the improvement of the Sow House station area, and the introduction of a bus hub. So my question really is, as far as I'm concerned, I think we need to be really encouraging people to get out of their cars and use sustainable transport, walk, cycle, do any form of walking or wheeling. And so my question is, will those sorts of infrastructure be put in fairly early to just try and encourage people to use them? So, for example, the bus hub, that would be great, because I think it's proposed that we could have a bus every 30 minutes to that development, which would be really good. If we could encourage people to start getting on the bus and cycling, that would be all to the good, I think.
Okay, if there's no further comments, can we go to speakers? Yeah.
My question is, when is the sustainable transport coming in?
Do you want to come into that?
Right, yeah, so in terms of the broad phasing, so I've got the phasing plans sort of up in front of us again. They are brought forward when most appropriate in terms of how the site develops through. So, as an example, the works around footpaths along Green Lane West, the links through to Wild Road here in the existing development, and some of the rights of way through the existing industrial estate are proposed fairly early on in terms of phase one, because that's quite key in terms of tying that early site in. as you go back, you sort of hit the where you reach some of those other connections. So that second connection through in phase 2, for example. So that will be linked to development in this area. I think at the moment, in this particular plan, the bus hub's shown around about the 3rd phase. Although I think we've already had discussions about whether we can enable that a little bit sooner than that. But again, it depends on infrastructure delivery up in that area in terms of viability and cost. But so that's the broad programme around that element of it. And I think that most of those sustainable transport links are in this southern portion of the site, because that then links into the railway station and the bus timetables. But so again, that will be reported back along with the phasings with those exact figures on. Yeah, so public transport will come in under phase 1 as well. There's plans that enable them to come in and out of that, and then that will be sort of managed as more of the developments brought forward in terms of how they go through that. That's included in the transport assessment.
Right, I've had an adjournment request just for 5 minutes, is that correct? Yeah. And then when we come back, we'll go to speakers. Okay, 5-minute break.